for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine.
Matt Wilkin's parents were teetotal, but that didn't put him off going into hospitality or developing a passionate interest in wine. After a couple of harvests in Australia, he carved out a career as one of the best sommeliers in the world, becoming a Master Sommelier and winning the UK title in the same year. For the space of 40 minutes, we discussed everything from wine lists to storytellers, Burgundy to the art of food and wine matching.
Hello, Matt. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you on. Where are you at the moment? Travelling the world? Somewhere glamorous?
No, I'm in Buckinghamshire at the moment, where it's all a bit grey and gloomy and overcast and a bit hazy outside, enjoying the British weather.
Oh, God, isn't it grim? Anybody listening to this podcast in another part of the world, particularly the Southern Hemisphere, God, you bastards.
That's why you get involved in this industry, so you can travel and get away from it.
I'm off to Argentina on Wednesday night, so I'm looking forward to that for 3 weeks. And by the time I get back, it's winter's over. There we go. You were born in a sunny bit of the world, McLaren Vale, south of Adelaide, also a famous wine region. Any connection with wine as a kid?
Nothing at all. So my parents, my mother worked for St. John's Ambulance. She worked in the back of ambulance and dealt with all the trauma, all that sort of stuff. And I was the youngest of five. And Dad was involved in floor contracting. He did lots of carpets and tiles and vinyls, and I would sometimes spend time working with him to make pocket money, but incredibly, very deeply evangelical Christian upbringing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We had port in the house that was just used for cooking. I think once my father gave it to me as a tummy ailment when I had a bad tummy, and that's when I first probably saw the magic of port.
Are they foodies? Do they list like food?
No.
Christ.
We were all I was the youngest of five. It was hard graft. It was we were down in the Southern Vales. It was we were hardcore working, and I was brought up mainly with my brothers and with my sister, really.
Yeah, so, but hardworking people by the sounds of it. They were grafters,
but good, honest, hardworking. Yeah. And I think that has really stuck with me all of my life.
Yeah, you've always been a grafter, I think. I mean, after you left school, did you go straight into the hospitality industry?
No. I spent a year actually bumming around for a summer working in a petrol station and fixing fitting up people's barbecue gas bottles and doing trailer hire and putting chocolate bars on the shelf and degreasing the driveway. And then I was actually just surfing and spearfishing and hanging out with my mates and mountain biking and hiking. And after a year, my dad kind of said, "You're not going to keep doing this. You need to go out and get a proper job." I went to Airbray Agricultural High School. And that's opposite Waite Institute, which is now where the new Roseworthy is. And so it's a normal school, high school. But instead of learning music or languages or drama, you did agricultural science, animal husbandry, crops, soils, vineyards, orchards, beekeeping, the lot. And there was a natural progression for that. And I didn't really have the opportunity to go to university at the time. It's just how we grew up, and we were so far from Adelaide. Even the idea of going into Adelaide was kind of scary, daunting, right?
What, like flying to Paris or something?
So yeah, 100%. Taking the training was like taking the Eurostar, And basically, it was. I saw I had to make a decision. My father said, where we were, it was there wasn't a lot happening down in the Southern Vales. And at that time, actually, I remember my father was reading in the newspaper about how the wine industry was booming. We're talking late 80s here.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the start of the Aussie boom, wasn't it? The modern boom.
Yeah. And so my father thought that I was going to get involved in the agricultural side and work in vineyards. And I went to Technical and Further Education, TAFE College, and there was a course in dining room service that had wine studies connected. And I was immediately attracted to that because I loved everything about soils and geography and geology and all that sort of stuff. And then when he saw that I was going to go into working in hotels and restaurants, he was really against that because he was so religious. And, he had this idea of what that would be like. And I think he was probably just thinking about the Ruffles pub environment.
So did you start in pubs or restaurants?
No. So I did the course, and as part of the course, you had to work somewhere, do a stage somewhere. And because McLaren Vale was just around the corner, I went to a place called McLaren's on the Lake. That was the Andrew Garrett Winery.
Yeah, I remember that.
At the time. And it was a hotel, motel. It had the winery there. There was a fine dining room. There was a courtyard restaurant. They did conferences. And there was like an opal shop next door selling all those kind of opal gems and stuff. And so it was the perfect toolbox. And I remember, I probably won't get penalized for it now, but I'd only just had my L plates at the time. And there was barely any police around. So I used to drive, right? I mean, just take off my L plates, and I used to drive to work and back. And that was because my dad wouldn't take me. And that's where I started. And when I was working there, it was during the first harvest. So, I actually started on the day of my birthday. And so we're talking
18,
like
right?
1989 here.
Yeah.
And so that was like in November. And then it came in rolling into March, and it was the harvest was happening, and Warren Randall was working there at the time. And working in the courtyard bar, we had the kegs, and all the kegs were kept in the winery area because it was cooler. And so when you had to go tap a keg, you'd go around. It was the old kegs where they had you had like the squash ball that was stuck in the top. And you had to do the T-bar, and you had to ram it down, and you get sprayed with beer. And I got distracted by what was going on, and I started walking around the winery where the crush and the press was happening and everything else. And Warren Randall shouted at me. And just told me, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, sorry, I'm just really interested because no one's out there telling me what's going on with wine or how to explain it." And so he said, "Well, if you want to come back later when we finish dealing with the crush, I'll run through everything with you." And I started, and he showed me all about the ferments and the press and the crush going on and what was happening with the barrels, and I loved it. And that's where it all started. But there was no real wine education at that time, and I went out and just bought books. I started self-educating myself.
But you did a sensory evaluation course, didn't you? You got a distinction. When was that?
Yeah, I did that with Bryce Rankin, who was the Dean of Faculty of Enology at Roseworthy in the wine tasting.
Understanding Wine, author of Understanding Wine. That was him, wasn't it? Yeah.
And I was just wow, this is just amazing. All these wines and we wouldn't really see a lot of international wines. It was very, patriotic South Australian wine drinking, still is to a certain degree. And I remember at the end of the course, he brought out like an old bottle, I think it was a 1970s, I can't really recall, probably 72, 75 La Lagoon. And he said, it's not the best vintage, but we're also used to drinking like Jimmy Watson Trophy 1 year and barrel.
Those are young Australian reds, right?
Yeah, like Kookawarra Crunches. And I was just like blown away with all these kind of tertiary development and finesse and aromas and flavors, which I still failed at that time to be able to convey.
But you were learning, right? And you were on the floor of the restaurant as well, so picking up stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, you're a very good taster. Is it something you were naturally good at? Do you think you got this distinction early on in the sensory evaluation course, or was it you grafting away again?
Yeah. So I worked at McLaren's on the Lake. Then the next year I went and worked a ski season in Victoria. Became like a total ski bum. Loved all that sort of stuff. But I was working in the restaurants there, etc. Hard working, but skiing all day, every day, because it was only you had to work 3 breakfast shifts and then 5 nights. So it was great. Came back and I started in Adelaide, across from Parliament House and the railway station. There was, I think it was called it was the Intercontinental, I think, and there was a dining room there that was called the Waterford room. It was all full of that horrible Waterford crystal, all that cut crystal, horrible. All the glasses, decanters, just like, savage, awful. And there was a chap there called David de Cruz, who was the head sommelier. And he saw my enthusiasm. He saw that I was so desperate to learn. And even for the menu, I would in the afternoons go to the Adelaide Library and I would look up ingredients and try to understand what marjoram was, which I never knew all of these ingredients, and understanding all these cheeses that I never had any contact with in my life. And he saw that determination in me. And one night after the service, he had a 1976 Chateau Soudereau. And he was like, "Here, Matthew, smell this. What do you smell?" And I was like, "I smell wine." Like I said, he goes, No. What can you smell? Just describe it. I said, I couldn't do it. And he said, "Okay, close your eyes and think of a color. What colors are you smelling?" And I said, I can smell kind of golden, kind of yellow. He said, good. So what do you know that's golden or yellow and smells like that? And I was kind of like, there's kind of like pineapple. And he's like, bingo. And there was peach, and there was like cracking. And there was like lemon. And that's when I thought, okay, that's how you communicate to customers. You go right back to basics, and you go back to probably when you first remember eating and tasting these things.
Yeah.
because that's what everybody understands.
Yeah, and you're good at. We'll come back to this, but I think you're very good at communicating that. Well, you were as a sommelier, and I think with the people you teach and consult for as well. But a little detour I noticed in your CV, 93, 94, you did a couple of harvests in Australia, didn't you? So Rockford Wines with Rocky O'Callaghan, and Grosset Wines, Geoffrey Grosset, Clare Valley, two legends. Were you thinking about going into becoming a winemaker then? You know, that McLaren's on the lake.
I would still love it now if it wasn't such a risk.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was traveling. I did my first travels over to Europe, and I came to the UK, France, Spain, went to Morocco, came back, went to Italy, came back to Adelaide. I had to start at my feet. It was around harvest time. And so I contacted the producers, and basically with Rockford, it was just like Jane Ferrari was working there at the time, and she kind of took me under her wing, and I went up, and I really wanted to operate the basket press, you know, and I had no idea how difficult
the famous
it was.
Basket press, right? He's got a wine named after his basket.
Yeah, you had to shovel grapes, like proper shovel out of a big cement vat into there. It was exhausting. It was all the carbon dioxide, made you really dizzy, and you start using the ratchet system, and that's easy, but in the end, you're like Conan the Barbarian. And you're walking along with this huge thing trying to press these grapes. And it was that was that side of it. And I knew at the time you had Chris Ringland working there with Robert O'Callaghan. So that were quite helpful. And at that time, Jancis Robinson came to Australia, and she was doing like a TV documentary at the time and stuff. And I remember seeing her and like going, oh my God, you know, like a top wine person, you know, and just kind of being a bit in awe. And then with Jeff Grosset, that was a proper vintage. So Stephanie O'Toole, his wife at the time, she just had a child. She had Mount Horrocks. So we were running between Mount Horrocks and Jeff Grosset. And I was staying with them up in their house. And it was at nighttime, it was just pitch black, and there was just no noise after living in Adelaide. It was really hard to sleep because I wasn't familiar with such darkness and silence. And we were working around the clock. It was really hard graft. And at that time, he was making a Pinot that he was getting the fruit from the Adelaide Hills from Dr. Lindsay Barrett. And he was making the wine for Dr. Lindsay Barrett. And it was the first time I was foot treading grapes and absolutely loved it. And we would sleep on the floor in the office waiting for the fruit to come in on these trucks in the middle of the night. And it was literally just Jeff and I.
So you nearly became a winemaker. You'd like to have done it, but you just didn't see the money.
Yeah, I still have a huge passion about it. I think the thing is, it's such a risk. I mean, if you started off from scratch, and you start off investing several million. Yeah. All it takes is 3 difficult vintages back to back, and you're bankrupt.
Or an importer somewhere to go under with half your stock or whatever. Yeah. So you worked at these, some pretty smart restaurants in Australia. Then you moved to the UK, 99, to work. I think it's first time I met you, at the Capital Group, executive group sommelier. I mean, pretty smart job. I mean, was that a bit kind of daunting, a big step up?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing was, I was on a working holiday maker visa. So 1 year full-time, 2 years part-time. And I was going to stick by the rules because I've always done that. And so I started working at Gary Road, City Road. Some of the staff had left. They'd gone to the greenhouse in Hayes Mews in Mayfair. And then all of a sudden a slot became available at the Capital because the Capital owned the greenhouse at that time. And Garrett Devaney was working there at the time. And so the head sommelier had left. Garen had come on board. They needed a hand. The new Eric Chavot was coming in. Big, name coming in. Chef from Arcachon, and all about going for the Michelin star. And I thought, oh my God, if I can get this on my CV, it'd be amazing. And so that's how I got into that role. And then later, Garrett had left because he wanted to go overseas and learn winemaking and learn French, which he did. And basically, I stayed on at it, but then I had to be sponsored. Right. So, because otherwise you head back. The whole idea of working holiday maker is that you're either part-time or full-time 1 year, 2 years casual. So I saw the opportunity, and Brian Crozer would often come to the hotel.
Famous Aussie winemaker.
Yeah. And he would meet up with Christian Bizot from Bollinger, right? Because his daughter had married into the family and everything else. And they were making wines together in Australia. The whole Tapanapa thing, et cetera, et cetera. And Brian said to me, he said, don't come back. Stay here. He said, the amount of knowledge that you will get, you will just expand massively. If you come back, you just won't. And so I spoke to the Levins, and at that time, David Levin, Joe Levin, and I asked about sponsorship. But of course, I had to leave the country while the Home Office did the process.
For how long?
Oh, it was about kind of several months, right?
And then come back again.
My girlfriend at the time, she was from Vendée. Loire Valley, France. So I don't forget, I never learned languages.
Yeah.
Right? So this was like total, sink or swim.
Yeah.
And I went to the Loire Valley. While I was there, I was like just hanging out for a while, waiting for an answer. And then her uncle he's a boulangerie baker.
Oh, so that's how you learned to be a baker.
So that's how I went to go work there. But the problem is I have an allergy to flour. So
that was a bad place to be.
So yeah, it was really difficult. So like a lot of antihistamines going on there. And then after that, I went down to Bordeaux and I worked at Chateau Montelot in the Entre de Mer. Yeah. And literally, I was just like a cellar hand, and I was like cleaning barrels and cleaning tanks.
And then you came back, did you? And then you started full time. Yeah. And had it had a star by that point or not?
I had a star by then, and then I carried on working with Eric for 5 years, and we went up to 2 Michelin stars.
Yeah, which is great.
And we went to 2-star when Gordon Ramsay Royal Hospital already went to 3-star.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I just wonder briefly, is pressure that comes with working at a Michelin-starred restaurant? Massive. Is it a different type of experience? Different customers? Do they expect more?
Well, you see, it depends on the type of place. So the Capitol Hotel, Harrods, Knightsbridge, very old school type of money. Much easier to look after, I think, than Nouveau Riche. Much polite, considerate. They were a pleasure to look after, but the pressure was huge because of the standards and because we always wanted to go for that 2nd star. I don't think we ever would have got the 3rd because Michelin has certain guidelines. We did breakfast in that room every day. It was a 7-day week operation. It just wouldn't have worked, basically, to go for 3-star. But we were always trying to be that 2-star that deserved a 3, but always was above its, punched well above its weight. Yeah. But the pressure was massive. You work 10 shifts a week. You start there at 9 a.m, you leave at 1. A break wasn't a break. You're either at a tasting, or you're dealing with deliveries, or you're doing stock take, or you're updating the wine list. It was just like that. And sometimes you would work 7, 8, 9 days straight.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I did a piece years ago, for one day of working at Gordon Ramsay with our mutual friend, Ronan Sayburn. I got there at 9 a.m. He was already there. And when he let me go home, I think at midnight, he was also still there. So, he must have those days. I mean, no wonder people give up being sommeliers in the end and do other stuff. It's just too hard work.
I used to live in Battersea at that point, and I would cycle down. I would cycle to work, and I would ride down past Royal Hospital Road. And at 1 o'clock in the morning,
Ronan and I
would do blind tastings at that time in the morning.
What made you want to be a master sommelier?
So when I studied in Adelaide, we heard about this master sommelier title and how rare they were. And I was like, wow, oh my God, imagine being one of those. Never really thought about ever doing that. And when I was at the Capitol Hotel, and Brian Julian was very proactive.
He was important he was head of the organisation, right?
Oh, if he didn't stay on and try to keep it alive, I don't know if it ever would have got to where it got to these days. He's given his whole life to it, and it's a massive credit. Huge respect. And a pamphlet came in the post. And I looked at the courses and what was going on. And at that time, I was part of the sponsorship with the Levens was that I had to, in that 5 year, I had basically I said I was going to win UK Sommelier of the Year. I would get my WSET diploma, and I would get my MS.
You did it all, didn't you?
And I did it all. Yeah, I absolutely stayed at it. And I was doing my diploma, and I remember I came back from the DRC tasting with Corny and Barrow with Ronan in a taxi, and I was asking. He was already ahead of me, and I was like saying, do you think I should be doing these things at the same time? He's like, sure, yeah, I do. I mean, one contributes to the other. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. So then I started doing it. And then with the combination of the diploma, I was doing the competitions, not because I wanted to be the winner. I just felt like I was a huge piece of Swiss cheese full of holes with knowledge. And I had to fill those gaps.
Yeah, and that was the way of doing it.
And that's why I did the competitions. The next thing you know, you make the semifinals. Next thing you're in the finals. You're like, well, I got to do it now. I got to finish it.
I mean, you were very successful in competitions. You said, you were UK Sommelier of the Year, I think, 2005. I mean, is there a competitive streak in you where you thinking, I could do this?
Yeah, there is.
Is there a bit of the Aussie in you?
I was always trying to beat myself, right? Yeah. I was always trying to improve myself. So it was always like, can I do that? Could I actually do that? Because I never really thought of myself to be successful, really. And but I was massively into sport, huge, and it does come with that aspect, but. For me, it was about, can I beat myself? Can I do one step better? And you did,
right?
Yeah.
And I want to ask you what makes a good sommelier, because I think, you don't do it anymore. You're not on the floor anymore, but you were a very good sommelier. And I always enjoyed being in restaurants where you were working. Just tell us what made you good. Can you analyse it and say, I was good at this? Do you make people feel relaxed? Is that part of it?
I did a lot of travel. So before I came to the UK, I did that thing where like a typical Australian, shot off for 6 months, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, Indonesia,
Bali.
yeah, Bali. But and then I came to Europe as well. So I think travel, because travel opens your mind. And I think it's so important that coming with life experience, to understand people, you need to understand multiple cultures, and multiple types of people. And it's interesting working in restaurants, because you see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you actually compare yourself against it, and you learn. Okay. So I think the most important thing is, apart from life experience, is empathy, being able to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. A good sommelier will be one that will buy wines for, will actually be very careful and be considerate for the business, controlling money, thinking about the food, what's going on in the kitchen. So your knowledge on what happens with food and ingredients is massively important, especially with sauces. Especially, you can ignore the meats to a certain degree, but it's the sauces that I always used to really focus on, and I can imagine the rest when I was like food and wine matching. But you need to buy for customers, so that means that if there's wines that you don't like, you still have to buy them, because they're for the customers. A bad sommelier would be someone who would only buy and construct a wine list based on what they like, and wouldn't listen to a customer, and just thinks that they are a demigod, or
looks down on somebody because they order the Sancerre or something, which would be a kind of default choice. Or
yeah, but see, when I did a list, like my house wine was the most important wine because it set the marker. So I was proud of my house wine, right? So if you're going to put on a Sancerre, put on a Sancerre that you're proud about, right? That speaks. It doesn't have to be the most expensive, but it's got to be it's got to be absolutely correct of its type.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that struck me again, my vast experience of being a sommelier that night at Gordon Ramsay, I was very nervous doing it because I'd never served at a table before, and not since I was 18. And it also occurred to me that some of the people in the restaurant were nervous too. In that they're not used to eating 3-star Michelin restaurants, and for them it's quite a big deal. And I suddenly thought, hey, as long as you said you establish that empathy with the customer, and if you've made a mistake, you say you've made a mistake, and you explain wines to them that you understand and like, I think you get on, don't you? I think and the problem with sommeliers is the kind of arrogant ones who think that you're just an audience for them, basically.
Yeah, well those sommeliers, there's only one word for that, and that's insecurity.
Yeah.
End of story. The most important word of all in service is trust.
Yeah.
With the customer. If you can establish that trust, firstly, it's okay not to know.
Yeah. There's
some weird kind of like unwritten rule out there that you should know about wine. You have to know about wine.
Yeah.
Well, the point being is that what you need to know is what you like the flavors of and what you like to drink. And for a lot of customers, even they struggle to put that information across. So what I would always do when I was working in the restaurant, I would never try to sell some of the most expensive wine. That was never part of the plan ever. You end up developing the sixth sense when you work in restaurants, and you have to read people very, very quickly. Are they fun? Are they introvert? Are they surly? Do they like to have a bit of a banter? And you work all that out within the first few minutes.
Yeah.
And body language tells a lot.
You become a good psychologist.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. And so I would often, so the most important thing with that trust is listening, because if they feel like they're being heard, then they trust you. And so I would always come with 3 recommendations. I would always hit something in the middle, recommend something a little bit more expensive, but also recommend something a little bit less expensive. And that developed the trust. Yeah. And often when people, so one of the hardest parts is when sometimes people would think they would explain to you what they wanted, and then you would serve that wine. So that's nothing like what I would like. So what I would always talk about was, where do you normally like to buy wines from? What grape varieties?
Yeah.
So if they said South Africa, I thought, okay, you like a bit of sun.
Yeah.
You like a bit of ripeness. I know where to take you. If somebody started mentioning something from northern Italy, I would know straight away they would like tension.
They like tannin and acidity or something like that. I mean, are these skills that you can teach, do you think? Because you do a lot of training, don't you? I don't know if you do as much now as you used to, but you still do a fair bit. I mean, is it much easier teaching an extrovert than it is teaching an introvert, for example, or can you pass on these skills to people?
So with the extrovert, as long as they've got good life experience, it's not difficult. But if they're an extrovert and they don't, there's nothing more annoying than a yappy chihuahua. With the introvert, it's about giving them the confidence, and actually that's the best part, when you see them blossom and they grow. And so there's that humility. That's the point. The more knowledge you get, the more of the Professor Dumbledore you're meant to be, right?
Yeah.
You're not meant to be like, part of the Slytherin group.
And tell us about food and wine matching, because I think you're, again, not blowing smoke up your what, but I think you're very good at this. I always, whenever I think, oh shit, what do I match this with? I'd give you a buzz. What tips would you pass on to people who are cooking at home, looking for a wine to drink with supper? Are there any, basic rules they should follow? And any real no-nos? I mean, anything we think, don't even go there.
Yeah, I mean, so there is that classic scenario of like white meat, white wine, red meat, red wine, but then you do think about the density and the intensity
and the sauce,
of flavor. And 100% the sauce, and then certain carbohydrates. But if I'm serving a wine that's kind of low on acidity, and Viognier can be like that, then you need to go with something that's quite fleshy, because it's quite an oily textured wine to a degree, but there's a level of sweetness with the ripeness of that fruit works quite well, right? So that's why the classic mitochondria would be like lobster with a butter sauce, right, for example. If you're looking at something quite tannic, you need protein. And so people kind of find it quite difficult to understand about how that works. And the simple thing is, if you put a red wine in your mouth, and if you rattle it around your mouth can become quite puckering dry. And that's because the tannins are attacking the protein. It's the protein that makes your saliva slippery. And therefore, as it attacks it, they coagulate and you lose that slippery texture. So once you go for a tannic wine, you're looking at protein and carbohydrates. If it's too tannic, if you want to soften those tannins, increase the level of salt.
Salt or a bit of cheese, maybe? Fats, really.
Yeah. But the fattier the meat, the more tannins you need. But just keep freshness with freshness. And acid
with acid, I always think, don't you? In a way.
Yeah, but see that also, that doesn't work sometimes, because like certain for ages with like curries and like fried Asian dishes, I found it quite hard to make a match. And it was like, you do a Riesling, and it's like I don't really find it working.
You want something slightly sweet, do you? Probably medium
sweet.
But
I actually found that orange wines work really, really well. But they got
so orange wines with curry or not?
100%. 100%.
Oh, we've got to try that. That's a tip.
I promise you. Like you try it with a red curry or like a lamb red curry with an orange wine, you'd be blown away. It works.
Next time I see you, I'm going to try that. And any no-nos? Anything you should say? Don't try this at home.
Ooh.
Anything with rhubarb.
I mean, there's always that classic thing where like olives and artichoke and things like that don't work, but I still manage to find a way if you can make with the sauce and the flavor. But don't put a light wine. One of the big no-nos is that if the dish is quite sweet, it will actually strip the sugar from a wine and make the wine look quite thin. So you need to start with anything that's got richer texture or creamy, or you need to go for a fatter, richer wine. So I would be looking at higher alcohol on that level. So if you're looking at a low alcohol wine with something that, unless the acidity is screaming off the Richter scale, that can help. Yeah, the thing is with food and wine is that you would find that some of the most obscure things come together out of mistake.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I mean, I once did one amazing match, which was chocolate brownies with Guinness. It was absolutely brilliant. I'm just farting about. So this is great. And tell us about restaurants. I mean, if somebody's going to a restaurant, how do they get the best out of a restaurant wine list? I mean, how do they read the list, in the sense? How do they get the best out of the sommelier, assuming there is one? Or if there isn't one and you're choosing stuff, what would you advise people to look for? Regions? Styles?
Firstly, as a customer, just be honest.
Yeah.
Don't play up on knowledge that you don't have. It's like going to a mechanic and trying to tell them about what's wrong with your car, and they're going to work out straight away you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I would say that the best thing is to say, look, tell them what your budget is.
If you say that.
Yeah, but if it's a situation where you're out dining and you don't want to say that in front of your guests, then contact the restaurant beforehand and speak to the sommelier. They're there to help. A good sommelier will help you saying, okay, we're coming this evening, we're going to be this many people, this is my budget, I would like to have this much of an array of wines. If you can stick within that, it'd be greatly appreciated. I know a little bit, I don't know anything, but I'm happy to be guided by you, but we're looking for a good time. It's all about just telling, being honest about what you want, telling what you want.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. It's I guess it's the same when you buy anything else.
Yeah. I mean, you worked, after you left the capital, you worked at Genesis Wines for a bit, so sort of important wholesaler. I knew a little bit then, but then you set up that amazing gastro pub, Princess Victoria. And I loved that place. I mean, it didn't stay open long enough in my view, but how did it compare running a pub with working in a 2-star Michelin restaurant?
I think by then I spent so long dressed up in a starched outfit with like a lapel and like bow tie. I was fed up with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I quite like the whole idea of I wanted to strip everything back and just stick with the knowledge that I had and make it fun. And we saw an opportunity there it was a huge success. It was a wine.
It was called a wine pub, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. So it was an old gin palace down the back end of the Uxbridge Road. There was an old QPR site that some murders had happened on site, and there was
on site.
Oh yeah, in the front door there when you walked in, there was a murder that happened there. There was infamous for people smoking crack in the toilets and things like that. And it was on the back of a housing estate. And so we went down. It was this beautiful gin palace, and we completely stripped the whole thing back. Some people didn't like it; they tried to burn the place down. Part of it, the roof caught on fire. We had to rebuild that. So we were up against it, but there was no way I was going to back down. And it was such a beautiful site, and the area needed it because if you're looking at the demographics, how everything was branching out from Barnes right through to Chiswick, Hammersmith, and then
West London, basically.
Shepherd's Bush was going to be next, and Westfield was on the way. It all made sense. The timing was right. Yeah. So I just came in with everything that we did, and James McLean, the chef as well. He came from the greenhouse as well, and he was a Michelin star. He worked in Michelin star restaurants. And we just we made everything right. We had the right food, in the right environment. We didn't fluff it up. The wines were all at the right temperature. We had the right glasses to match. There was this incredible license where you could do anything. It was the ultimate this old license where you could do live bands, music up until 4 a.m. It was incredible. And so I wanted to make it fun and make it accessible. So we didn't go on high markups. We got the budget.
And how big was the wine list? I'm trying to remember. It was much smaller than the capital, obviously.
It was several hundred, I think about 300 or 400 wines, basically.
Well, that's amazing for a pub wine list, isn't it?
Yeah, and we had a little courtyard garden at the back, and we were serving cigars, and we had great spirits, and of course we made it a bit of a gin theme going on. Yeah. We won, within the first year, we won Time Out Gastro Pub of the Year. Yeah. We won Wine Pub of the Year. Yeah. I got awarded with Harper's Wine Personality of the Year.
Another award.
And the Australian government invited me along to the Strand for the Australia Day Awards, and alongside Jill Hicks, who got Australian of the Year, and she lost both of her legs in the 7/7 bombings in London, and she did a charity walk to not promote hate, but to promote understanding. She walked all the way from Leeds on her prosthetics to London.
Wow.
Sir David Attenborough won honorary Australian of the Year for all of his contributions to Australian tourism with all of the documentaries that he'd done on Australian. And I won Young Australian Achiever of the Year. And there I was standing on stage, with Sir David Attenborough and Jill Hicks, and just like, wow.
Was your dad still alive then?
Sorry?
Was your dad still alive then?
He was, yeah.
Did he know? He knew you were Young Australia of the Year?
Yeah. Oh, he loved that. Yeah, he loved all that. Yeah. So, but the thing is, it was just a huge success. We just want to make it fun. I didn't take a day off for 5 months. I was there every morning from 9 to 1.
Because you loved it, right?
Well, not just that. We had to get it right. It was really hard to convince quality staff to come down to that area because it was all still a bit scary.
Yeah.
The police loved us. The council loved us because we were
taking people off the street, right?
Yeah, and it was good for the value of the housing in the area, and it was a huge success. And then after that was in 2008, and then just at the start of 2010. We were part of an umbrella company that was having another pub that was called the Anglesey Arms in Hammersmith, and with one of the investors in that business who had the A shares, there was conflict going on, and I was a bit uncertain about what is really happening here. And there was some certain situations where there was meetings that were a bit disingenuous, and I could see that they were having a lot of conflict between their own internal family. And I thought, well, if that's you and your family, who am I? Yeah. And so basically, just in a nutshell, I thought, it's time to leave.
So you got out.
Christian Honoré had approached me about H2 Van and said, look, I'm wanting to set up again.
Who became your partner in H2 Van,
yeah. And H2 Van means, everyone thinks it means water to wine, but it means Honoré second time round doing a wine.
Oh, is that what it means? In wine. And you specialised there, in principally in France and Spain, didn't you? I'd say, Loire, Burgundy, bits of Spain.
Yeah, and we had good snippets from South Africa, as you would have known, with the Sarensberg and De Walt Haynes at the time, etc., etc., and working in collaboration with Richard Kelly, MW, with a lot of his contacts there with South African wines.
Yeah,
and then we also had snippets from some cult wines like Bell Hill, which we still do to this day. Bell Hill Vineyard, North Canterbury,
fantastic Pinot
Chris
and
Ringland,
Chardonnay.
Rosser.
Yeah. And you're now part of Alliance Wine, a bigger company. How's that going to change what you do? Because Christian's retiring, isn't he now? Maybe he's 70. He doesn't look 70. It's all that good wine he's been drinking. He looks so good on it. Yeah.
Well, bearing in mind he's 70. He's about
he's in good shape.
And he is. But he was meant to retire around. The whole plan when we set it up was he was to retire around 2020, and of course, a lot of things went wrong in terms of like the pandemic, the whole problems with the difficulties that made our life so much harder with Brexit administratively. It was just more red tape after the other and ridiculous paperwork, and it was just so confusing. And HMRC weren't even able to keep up, and still today they still can't quite keep up with the new duty tax system that's coming in. And then there's
isn't it? The whole thing's in.
It started.
It's a nightmare, isn't it? I mean, running a wine business has just become. I mean, I don't run one, but just observing it in my 40 years in the trade, it's just become so much harder, isn't it? All this stuff.
Well, that's the thing. Ever since the whole thing with the Brexit vote, and then the pound crashed, and then it kind of recovered again a little bit, and it was never been as high as it was, and all the extra paperwork that was coming in, and all these laws changing. Instead of being out and selling wine with customers, we were just doing constant admin. It was like being a wine accountant. It was not a lot of fun, but we survived and we got through. There was a few difficulties I had. We lost mum and dad within 4 months of each other during the pandemic back in Australia. I was stuck here. I couldn't go back to because we were in lockdown, so I had to play by the rules. Then I because I had such a sporting life, I had completely caused a lot of problems with my my hips, right? So I had a little impingements, which happens a lot with tennis players and stuff, and so I had to get within 3 months of each other, I had both my legs dislocated and resurfaced, which is the same surgery that Andy Murray had. So I got metal hips, basically. It took 9 months to learn to walk again, got back on track, and then we kept on firing away. And we got through, and we were given a grant by the government. We were given 2. The second one we gave back because we made it through. We furloughed everybody. I became white man van with a high-vis jacket, running around trying to sell wine to rugby club, school parents.
I bought lots of wine from you. I think it's an important thing to do to keep their businesses going. Really,
and we got through it. And then Alliance approached us. And it was a situation where I thought, hold a second, I really like. They've been going for 40 years, based in Scotland. They've got their own bonded warehouse. They've got a fantastic logistics setup. You can order it before 12 o'clock and get a next day delivery. It gets all palletized in the afternoon from Beath, down on the truck overnight to a depot outside Heathrow, and it delivered to London the next day for a bit of a fraction of what I was doing with London City Bond. And there's the support with the team.
So you're out and about doing what you like doing rather than paperwork. I'm very happy. One of the things you just mentioned, this wines from South Africa, wines from New Zealand. I mean, the Loire, is not necessarily mainstream, is it? I just wonder how the idea of fine wine has shifted in your time in the wine and hospitality business. I mean, you still obviously specialise in Burgundy, which is fine wine. Is it still dominated by what we think of the classic regions? So probably Burgundy, Bordeaux, maybe northern Italy, Tuscany. A bit of Napa.
It still is, but it also depends on the consumer, whether they're buying to drink or they're buying to invest, if they're looking at futures. So that still is occurring in a very boutique way. I think Bordeaux's in big trouble. Burgundy, I think they overdid it, to be honest with you. And the thing is, they've got Olympic-sized swimming pools of wine versus some other areas like Burgundy where it's tiny. And I think geopolitically, what we've seen what we all witness every day, and you want to at a certain point monitor what you watch on the news because it's just quite depressing. But there's the money's frozen at the moment. Basically, I think that they were talking about reducing the interest rates for the banks by about 3% this time last year. It only dropped by 0.25% by November. If you've got more than 6 figures in the bank, you can negotiate up to 7% interest with the bank. That's probably more of a guarantee than the stock market if you want to play safe. So the wealthy, where there's money, there's always money, but the wealthy's not spending, and now you're not getting the domino effect where it runs down into the middle classes, into the working classes, and that's where all the wobble's going on. And it's the middle classes who actually cane the credit cards. They're the ones who actually go out and have a lot of fun. And so what's been happening there in the on-trade in particular is that a lot of the say like £100 bottle of wine or £150 bottle of wine bangers that they used to buy. Now people are reverting back and just drinking by the glass.
Yeah.
And where you're selling wine into Michelin star restaurants where they're selling those wines for about £300 a bottle, they're moving with people with money.
Yeah.
But so the dynamics have shifted and changed. And I think until people people were waiting to really see the effects of Brexit. They were waiting to see what the effects of what's going on with Russia, Ukraine, what was going on in the Middle East, what was going on with Trump, what would happen with tariffs. Everyone's just been like watching.
They're being cautious.
Yeah. And so people won't want to take massive risks until they can see a bit more stability.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's hope that happens soon.
And on that note, what happened in the pandemic, people, because they felt so uncomfortable, wanted guarantees. So they went back to drinking classics.
Yeah.
You know, they went back to having carbonara and Chardonnay, and they had Chianti and pizza and whatever else. And that all of the esoteric wines.
Comfort food, yeah?
Yeah, the esoterics have slowed down a bit. But also because we lost a lot of good storytellers, and they came often from Europe, and with the whole EU settlement scheme and with Brexit, a lot of them just left.
Yeah,
and we got a big shortage on numbers. It's
this is sommeliers and service staff.
It's everywhere. But you need good storytellers to sell the esoterics.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. Listen, final question is, how do you get away from wine? I mean, your list of non-wine interests make you sound like Action Man or a kind of retired member of the SAS. Skiing, motorcycling, mountain trekking, canoeing on 2 metal hips. I mean, you like to stay in shape, do you?
Yeah, I do. It goes up and down. At the moment, my son is 11 and I get involved in cricket coaching and with football refereeing, because if you don't, then they don't get to play. Yeah, basically. So you have to jump in. So I get involved. I will referee a match once a week. I'll do winter nets every second Wednesday with the kids. And then I'll do first aid refereeing courses, etc. So I still ride the motorcycle. I'm going on a canoeing trip to, it's actually going to be a sea kayak trip in the end of April, beginning of May, to Norway with my partner. We're going to go over to Voss. Yeah. And we're doing a 3-day sea kayak trek up through the fjords. Then we're doing a 27-kilometer hike up to about a mile high, basically, to see a view. We'll be camping two nights by the fjords, and then canoeing back again, or sea kayaking back again. So I probably don't do enough exercise as I should, to be honest with you. But I have an adventurous spirit, and I don't want to lose that.
That's brilliant. That's Matt. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing the details of your amazing life and inspiring life in wine, food, hospitality, and business. Thanks, mate.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Well, Matt sure knows how to tell a good story himself. You can see why he was such a great sommelier. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is Martin Krajewski from Chateau Séraphine and Clos Cantenac in Bordeaux. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website